I started training with my dad really as soon as I could walk. I mean, my dad was a really diligent trainer, and he always had people over at the house practicing.
My dad had a circle of students that were close to him, and so they were friends of our family. And one of those men, Danny Inosanto, continued to be my teacher, so it's kind of a nice unbroken line.
I have his books at home with all of his underlining and his notes in them, and it's fascinating to see where he drew his sources from, from what sources he drew. He's got books on Western fencing at home that he would use, on boxing. I remember he always used to say that you want to try and absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and add what is essentially your own, and that was kind of his credo in creating Jeet Kune Do.
When people ask me the question in interviews generally what my style is, I usually say, well, my father created the art of Jeet Kune Do while he was alive, and I have been trained in that. Because it's simple to say that. However, I actually truly feel that it's a little bit too simple to say that, because Jeet Kune Do was my father's very personal expression of the martial arts. He intended it to kill a lot of sacred cows. So I always feel a little bit silly saying that I practice Jeet Kune Do, although I certainly have been trained in it. It would be more accurate to say that I practice my own interpretation of Jeet Kune Do, just as, frankly, everyone who practices Jeet Kune Do does, because that's what it was intended to be. Danny, my Sifu, always talks about teaching Jeet Kune Do concepts. In other words, teaching someone the concepts, a certain way of thinking behind the martial arts, as opposed to teaching them techniques. To me, that kind of illustrates the difference between giving someone a fish and teaching them how to fish. You know that old story, right? You can teach someone a certain block, and then they have that block. Or you can teach someone the concept that lies behind such a block, and then you have given them an entire area of thinking that they can grow and evolve in themselves. They can say, I see, so if that's the concept, then you could probably also do this, right? Yeah. And that's, I think, a lot of what lies behind Jeet Kune Do, and that is then dedicated to creating a really creative, free-form martial artist.
Well, my dad made a point at the time that he was training that there were a lot of martial artists who weren't paying enough attention to their instrument, and certainly the instrument of the body is what you're going to be using in your practice of the martial arts. So I think it's very important to keep up the tempo, so to speak.
I'm interested in that point you reach where you actually fail from exhaustion at something, whether it's a weight training exercise or a cardiovascular exercise. I'm interested in seeing just how much that point is a physical point and how much it's a mental point. And so that's what I do. I jump a lot of rope, I run, I ride a life cycle. I much more prefer to go out and actually ride a bicycle or run and see some scenery. And then I work out down at the academy, which is on some levels a very cardiovascular workout. Some of the classes I take, like the Muay Thai kickboxing classes, a hell of a cardiovascular workout. And then some of the classes are more technique oriented, so you're not huffing and puffing so much as you are just learning individual techniques. And then I work out at the weightlifting gym, where I do 2 body parts a day, pretty much, and then I break that up occasionally, so I do like back and biceps on one day, chest and triceps on another day, or something else, and delts and legs on the third, or something like that. And it was just switch it. I found that was generally the best thing to do, whether it was with a high weight or a low weight. And what I understood the process to be was that working with heavy weights would build mass, whereas working with low weights was intended to build like density and really carve out the muscle a lot more. And since I personally have never been interested in getting large as much as just getting cut, I tended to work with a lower weight. But then to me, getting cut is also mostly a question of vascularity. It has to do with how much body fat you're carrying. So I've always done a lot of cardiovascular work because that's also real world power too. I mean, I suppose it's good if you want to pick up heavy objects that have large muscles, but cardiovascular stamina is something that seems to come in handy a lot more often than a large muscle would. You go down to the academy and you try and do a 3-minute round on the Thai pads, and I don't care how big your muscles are, if you don't have a real good cardiovascular system, you're going to be dead in about 45 seconds, and I'm still going to be going.
Literally, on television, they had to shoot it, they had to overcrank and shoot it in slow motion because otherwise it just looked like a special effect when he moved. I mean, the man was fast. He was deadly fast. I've really never encountered anyone in all of my training since who was as fast.
You can certainly train for speed. I think that training for speed is, number one, it's a genetic factor. Yeah, certainly. There are some people who are just gifted. They are fast naturally. But I think training for speed, on the whole, is a question of muscle memory. Speed in an individual movement is something that, I mean, we're coming down to, thousandths of a second now. You and I, or even if I and some completely untrained person were to stand side by side facing a focus pad, and when a red light blinked, both flick out a jab, I'd probably win by a couple hundredths of a second. But once you're talking about speed with repetition of movements, to be able to go like that, that's muscle memory. An untrained person would be like, they would falter in their movements because they haven't trained their muscles, or they haven't trained their perception as well to be able to react quickly to a variety of different circumstances. The martial arts, which are an integral part of my life, come entirely from my father. But the martial arts, I'm completely beholden to my dad for. I mean, he started me in the martial arts when I could walk. He trained me my entire life until he passed away. And then even when I continued my training, it was with one of his students. When you move down the road towards the mastery of the martial arts, and you are constantly moving down that road, you end up coming up against these barriers inside yourself that will attempt to stop you from continuing to pursue the mastery of the martial arts. And these barriers are such things as when you come up against your own limitations, when you come up against the limitations of your will, your ability, your natural ability, your courage, how you deal with success and failure as well, for that matter. And as you overcome each one of these barriers, you end up learning something about yourself. And sometimes the things you learn about yourself can, to the individual, seem to convey a certain spiritual sense along with them.